just want to say thank you so much to all of you. You are amazing. Thank you for being here through. Thank you for having the quiche. But no, seriously, it has been an extraordinary experience. I think one of the things that has struck me most powerfully about the day already is that we have managed to bring together such a large number of people. There were about 250 of us for the afternoon, in order to come together across London and recognise what an incredibly important issue this is, but not just to come together with that sense of, oh no, how bad it is, but also to come together to say, we know we can do something, and we need to discern together what it is that we can do, how we can take that concern and that energy that we have and translate it into concrete action. So thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers earlier on, but thank you to you for the way in which you have come. You've contributed in the group discussions, and we're going to try now to bring those together to reflect on some of the key themes that came out of the different groups, and also then to look at the things that we can do next. And I just want to emphasise all the way through that we've been asking ourselves at every level what we can do, because this is not something which can be asked of someone else. It is always all our responsibility. But we need to make sure that it is our responsibility at every level, that it's not just individual, it's not just community and congregation, it's not just diocese and church, it's not just government, but that all of those different levels are working together, because it's only by that happening that we will see some real and concrete change. So what I'm going to do is to just pull out a few of the key themes that came out of each of the workshops, and then I'll ask the facilitators or a spokesperson for that workshop just to add a little bit from the experience of having been in the room with those in those conversations, and then we'll have a moment for some reflection and conversation. We're going to do that for each of the three workshops. And then I'm going to hand back over to Bishop Rob to lead us in thinking about the what do we do next. And we've got some ideas that we'd like to share with you that we were busy trying to chew over while we were also chewing our quiche and sandwiches, and to see how you feel about those. And then by then, hopefully, Bishop Sarah, Bishop of London, will be with us in order to help to round off our time and to send us on our way purposefully and also rejoicing. So, the first workshop, how can churches support those affected by serious youth violence? And these were the three key themes that came out as were heard by those who are trying to summarise it all. I think it's very good that prayer came out as a theme, because there is sometimes a danger in these events that one just thinks about the practical things one can do in a very secular sense. But one of the practical things we do as Christian people is pray. And we believe that prayer makes a difference. So the question then for me is, how do we translate we can pray into actually enabling people day by day to actually do the praying? Because it's one thing to say, oh, we can pray, but how many people actually, in their daily prayers, are praying for those who are involved in youth violence? Possibly not that many. How could we make that a reality in people's lives of prayer? To be a mentor, that's about being in relationship. It's about being able to offer something. And there is such a tendency among many people, including many Christians, to regard those who are in danger of being in youth violence as being a danger, not someone to whom they could offer something, but someone from whom they need to protect themselves. So how do we move towards that sense of confidence that ordinary people in our churches could offer something towards the young people that they meet, rather than feeling they need to ring up and complain about antisocial behaviour when they see three young people talking in the corner. And engaging with young people on the streets. Again, rather than running away or walking away, say, actually, these are people with whom we can have a conversation. How to have that sense that, we are human beings together in this community, in this place that we are. And to build those relationships, because it is out of building relationships of genuinely knowing each other that peace begins to come. There is no one whom it is more easy to commit violence on than someone who is a stranger. So how do we build those relationships? So those are three themes that came out. How can churches support those affected by serious youth violence? Was it Stephen who's helping to communicate? If you could come up and offer your own reflections as well, that would be really helpful. Thank you, Stephen.
Everyone, I'm Stephen Saxby. I'm from London Church of Social Action, and I had the privilege of facilitating the workshop with contributions from Rosemere Brown, who's a parish priest in Hackney, and also Les Isaac, who was the originator of Street Pastors. And indeed, these three ideas came out very, very strongly in the session. And not just praying, as it were, for people, but praying with people as well. We spoke about, for example, how when we become aware of an incident of serious youth violence, we could visit the home and we could offer to pray for people. We were talking a lot about the work of street pastors and the way street pastors is a practical action of being on the streets, meeting young people where they are and offering to pray for and with them there. So prayer came out very strongly, and even people saying, even if they're not actually approaching young people, someone was talking about how when she's driving in a car, when she sees groups of young people, she'll actively pray for people. So prayer was a very, very strong theme that came out. And secondly, the engagement on the streets. And I guess, again, we were particularly talking about the work of street pastors, which is a very easy and practical thing for Christians to do. Street Pastors offers training. There's an offer to everybody in the room that Les made earlier to spend a night with street pastors. Even if you think you can't do the training, can't become a street pastor, just spend a night with them, see what they do, and have that experience of going out with them at night. But there is the opportunity to train with them, and they're keen to encourage more people. And the great thing about it is ecumenical work. It's people from all traditions coming together and doing that together. And we spoke about mentors, but we also spoke about mentors in all sorts of different contexts. So one of those is the work that Street Pastors is developing now around college and youth pastors as well. So that's an extension of the Street Pastors scheme, taking the church into schools and having conversations with people in schools. Also, we spoke about how many churches are involved in the delivery of youth services, or able to support youth services, or to be involved in those kind of formal mentoring schemes. So, lots of practical actions about how we can be responding to people affected, people in communities who are scared, young people themselves, all things we can do, really flowing very much from our pastoral heart as Christians who care for people and care for our communities.
Stephen, thank you. I wonder if someone who was in the workshop would like to share their own reflections experience? It's your best side, don't worry.
Is it? Lord have mercy, now I feel absolutely conscious. Friends, my name is Jongi. I am the London District Chair of the Methodist Church, based at Westminster. It struck me in our conversations about the need for all action to be in togetherness, that our ecumenical speak and our action must together embody a sense of presence in what we do that encourages people, especially the young who are seriously affected by this, to know that it doesn't matter which door they land in, they'll still find a safe space, a place to belong, and they will find that they are affirmed as human beings and as individuals. So I was very grateful to be part of the group that saw this as a together exercise rather than an individuated one. And so I thank for that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great contribution. Then we got time for 2 or 3 other people to bring their own thoughts and reflections. Maybe it'd be easier if you stand in your place and say something, and then I'll repeat back to make sure that it gets onto the audio. Yes, fire away.
There's a lot of churches praying, but sometimes I just need us to be a bit more specific when we deal with prayers. You know, like when we went to the workshop too, we did talk about the weapon of our warfare are not carnal, and sometimes it's just take a break to say, why is this going on? Because I will always say one thing: a human being is not equipped to kill another human being without an outside help. So as much as we might say young people are killing each other, something have to influence them spiritually for them to get that mindset to kill another human being. So what I'm saying is, what have we invited into our nation? We've got a stranger roaming about in our nation that is influencing our young people. It's not a physical thing, it's a spiritual matter. And if you want to deal with it, we need to go back to that. Because if we do not take authority against the spirit, all of the spiritual things, the spiritual wickedness in high places, we can talk about it from day one. They're roaming out there. And then we need to stand together. We have the authority, we have the word of God. Jesus said we're seated with him in spiritual high places, far above principality and power. So it's having that understanding of who we are as a church, standing as a church, and fighting from that perspective to stop this. Because obviously, where they're coming from.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone else? Nelly, just...
I thought it'd be quite helpful just to give you key words, and I'll just speak them out, because there's so much to take in of a day, but they're key words that I think what I picked out from the workshops and all the speeches. So things that I've been thinking about, and I spoke to one street pastor, was the need for role models, mentoring, which we've said, that when you're the street pass, they find that they're dealing with a lot of young people, the 18 to 30-year-old, who are clubbing. So I kind of think you've got to be strategic where you place yourself. So strategy, that there's an identity crisis going on, and how the language that we use when we're engaging young people. If you're not a speaker, don't be a speaker. Be a prayer. Be true to who you are and how God has created you. That is really important, because I really said in our workshop, know your expertise, know your team, which really points to good leadership. We need good leadership, and leadership encourages their team. But if you're a hand, don't be a foot. I think a lot of us fall down because we're in the wrong bit, and collaboration we've already talked about, and complementing each other with our skills, and being visible as well. I think the street pastors are visible people.
Right. Thank you.
And vision and strategy. But without vision, people perish. I think it's about prayer, understanding the spiritual warfare, which is a specialised field, but we can all pray. But you've got to have vision. Without vision, people perish, and they are perishing.
Thank you. Thank you. One more, just behind you, Nelly.
Hi, my name is Tolu Rush, and I'm from Jesus House in Brent Cross. And I think one of the things I would like to actually say is that we need to be able to stand up for what we believe in and have that confidence instead of being apologetic for being Christians and for having values. And we don't stand up. We don't. We talk cow away, and other people are being very loud about what they believe in, and we just think, oh no, we can't talk because we have to be politically correct, I presume. And we are failing our youths. We are not passing on to them the values that we know are important, which is why we do what we do, but we're not really passing it on the way we should, confidently, so that they know that we are confident in what we believe in, and they're happy to come along with us as well.
Thank you. You remind me of the very depressing survey that was done a while ago about things that parents thought were important for their children to know, and that church-going parents only put at about number 6 to pass on the faith to their children compared to all the other things they wanted their children to learn about. And if that's what is happening among church-going Christian families, then that's not a very good sign, is it? So thank you. Let's move on to the next bit. Number 2, how can churches be welcoming places for young people involved in or at risk of serious youth violence? What can my church do? Provide a safe space. To be a place of genuine safety and security. What more can there be than that for so many people whose lives are so dangerous and insecure? Challenge the cuts to youth services. Well, there's a political challenge at every level. That goes right up to national government. And I presume that means demonstrate unity rather than unit. But it's a swift response operation. But I think that is really, really important. And the contributions that we've already had and the way in which our whole day has gone has demonstrated that this is something that brings us together across churches, something where we can work together without having to worry about all the other stuff that sometimes necessarily puts us in different places. But here we can all work together and witness together and take action together. So those are 3 things. And then there was, what can the wider church do? Open churches, use the space. I'm not sure about how much the wider church can do about that, but certainly when I was a parish priest, I made sure that the church doors were open. Provide training for clergy and congregations, absolutely. And work with our schools. Again, well, as the chair of the Board of Education in Southwark, what can I say? But absolutely yes. And is there someone who was helping to facilitate that group who would like to also offer a few reflections on how that conversation went?
Yeah, well, we talk about keeping our churches open, which is really, really important. But if you're a 16-year-old streetwise kid, we really walk into a traditional church which can look a little bit intimidating. I think we just put far too much demand on, not just on young people, but on people in general. We say to them, come to us. That, to me, is not a Christian message. We should be going out to them. So if people don't come to the church has to go out to the people. And this is our responsibility. This is the authority that Jesus has given to us when he commands us to go.
Thank you very much. Absolutely right. And are there some reflections, please?
Things that was mentioned in that workshop was the idea of how you can support a bereaved family, and one of the things was, you actually can't take the body and bury it next week. It may be months because it's the source of an investigation, a police investigation. But also that it doesn't stop at the graveside. It needs to go on sometimes for years. And we need to be able to be aware that we need to support right the way through for a very long time.
Thank you. It's very true.
I think another thing that was said was about working with and not just for young people.
Yeah.
Support is something that is, co-led, co-produced, and they are experts by experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a lot that they can shape in terms of the kind of support that they need and how they can also help churches to engage other young people, especially those who are hard to reach, especially if some of the churches are not accessible because of where they're based and also because of the perceptions about those churches as well. I think another thing that's mentioned in terms of demonstrate unit was also about how we evidence what we do, because this is paving a movement for positive change, but the impact that it creates along that journey is something that is important to evidence to gauge how, whether we know it's working, whether we're hitting that mark, and also get young people's views on whether that is and how we can grow that a bit more.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's so important that if churches are going to know how to work with young people, then they need to work with young people in working out what you do rather than coming up with a plan and then hoping it's going to somehow hit the mark. So thank you so much.
Just a response to the first person who spoke about the churches. and I completely hear and understand the call to go, and I'm really for that. But the space that churches provide for communities that are mourning, or the space where that 16-year-old actually has nowhere else to turn to and knows from a school assembly once that a church is a safe place to go to when something happens. And so that need to keep the traditional church buildings or whatever it is open as well, the kind of mixed economy that produces, and the kind of wonderful space a big scary building might be for quite a few different people. So both work.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. It's definitely a both and. And certainly my personal experience when I was in Stoke Newington was that we had the church door open and remarkably variety of people came in of whom you wouldn't necessarily expect to find themselves at home in church. But equally, many people would never even think of coming in. And if we had just thought, well, we've got the doors open, that's it, then we certainly would not have been doing what Jesus was calling us to do. So, you're absolutely right, I think, both of you. Does anybody else want to reflect on... Oh, sorry, yes, you're at the back. Yes, please.
I'd like to ask us, those of us who have church schools, particularly the Church of England, could you record your inclusion and exclusion rates, please, as a matter of policy? Because actually, if we can track those young people who are being excluded from school, and we have got the power to do it locally and set best practice, that will be a wonderful start, so that we can track young people and be a part of their lives.
I think there's one thing which is about rates, which is about general things, then there's another thing which is about individuals, which is much more difficult in terms of legalities and data. But I think I take your point completely, and certainly in the Southwark Diocesan Board, and I'm sure that's true of the other ones as well, we are really concerned to try to encourage all our schools to include people and to look at exclusion always as a last resort and as something where you feel you can do nothing else. We would never want our schools to be excluding people easily or with a light heart, as it were.
If we are we do need to make sure that we need to ask some questions, because we don't know what we're doing until we know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We need the data, but we need to also respect people's privacy. I think maybe was there one more person briefly?
Very briefly. So this is a reflection on this particular topic, but it's also across the whole rest of the day. I've been constantly reminded of. I was involved with I was involved with the 2011 riots, not the rioting, I hasten to add, but being out on the streets on the night in my parish, where there was a lot of rioting happening, and then following it in the various investigations into what happened. And the one thing that really came out from those investigations wasn't who rioted, but who didn't riot. And there was a constant thread of the young people who were in the right demographics of the same people that rioted but didn't riot, and the one constant thread was that they had an adult in their life who wasn't a parent, who they didn't want to let down. And that often was a youth worker, sometimes was a nan. And I think these relationships of individuals getting to know young people are so key and make all the difference in the world. And it's beyond just having a large, fabulous youth work with lots of money. It's about individuals taking the time to get to know our neighbours and getting to know our families better.
Thank you. Grandmothers have an awful lot to be thanked for. Let's move on to the third workshop. Work with community partners and schools, absolutely. We've been talking about that collaborative working. Interesting that mentors have come up again as they did in relationship to the first point. Just shows how we're converging on some common and really important themes. And then what can the wider church do? Provide training in youth mental health. My goodness, we know that that's such a need. Whether the wider church can do it or whether society as a whole needs to do it is maybe another question, but it's certainly something that's needed. Utilise young people in leadership roles. I mean, we talked earlier on, you made that very good point about the fact that if we are going to engage properly with issues that affect young people, then young people need to be involved in how we engage, rather than just being sort of passive recipients of it. So they need to be taking leadership roles along with us and to work with our schools. Again, both faith schools and community schools are such important places in which children and young people can discover, sometimes for the first time, what it might mean to live a life in responsible relationship with others. And if we can support and encourage them and the schools that are working with them, then that's a really significant thing for the church to do. And I'll pass over. You come up to give us some further feedback.
I was a facilitator, one of the facilitators.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've covered most of it, but just in terms of one of the...
Stand there and face the camera, then it'll...
Oh. Okay. So, yeah, we touched on quite a lot in our workshop. We had a lot of real talking and people engaging. And one of the things that we were really speaking about as well was mentoring. I'm extremely passionate about mentoring. And at XLP, I'm the mentoring project manager for Southwark. So I train, equip and recruit young people and mentors to work with young people at risk of exclusion and many other things. In Southwark, it's never a very simple case with young people. But one of the things we spoke about was really reminding each other, and I think we all kind of remember the fact that we all have something to offer. You know, we looked at the fact as well that one of the things, unlike many, when we go out in our different professional jobs and things where we're always out and we're able to talk, but you have to do, like if you go to a school or you're working in a different environment, you have to be very mindful in how you speak and what you can say. But the fact about as leaders in your churches, you're able to be real and remind the young person that God loves them. You're able to utilize that because it's expected. You know, so we spoke about that. We spoke about the fact that when we said them church spaces, you know, maybe something that you have access to a church space that maybe you're able to say, you know what, you can use this space. Workshops could be running here. This could happen, that could happen. You know, and we really spoke about one of the things we touched on again was also about the grandparents as well and bringing that gap and not neglecting our elders because we need them. Ed, is there anything you wanted to add to that we touched on in the workshop?
Just really quickly, we looked at the most vulnerable time for young people was between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. and how many young people from their schools walk past our churches or at bus stops, chicken and chip shops, outside of our churches, and what a time, if there's ever to target and to help young people feel safe, it's that time. Just speaking from experience, there's a real climate of fear, and I believe strongly we're called to be peacemakers. And if we can speak into that, one of the subjects that may well come up is we need to have an openness and ask the tough questions. And I think today is just the start of that. We've highlighted that actually there's a need for a bit of a forum and a space of saying, oh, this worked, this didn't work. But I've been really encouraged by today that people do want to be involved. And I really hope and pray that there's follow through. Yeah.
I just add one last thing, that's all right. Just to say, I'm the chatterbox in XLP. Just to say as well, one of the things that we did touch on as well is that we've heard a lot about prayer and all those things, and it is so important. You know, there's a prayer, but just to be reminded also that we mustn't be so heavenly bound that we serve no earthly good. There's practical things that need to be done too. We need to walk, we need to go, we need to meet these people, we need to do different things. We can talk, we can pray, we can fast, but let's do the practical things as well.
Thank you so much. I'm reminded in what you said of some of the prayer events I've been part of in relationship to this. And some of the thing that has slightly worried me sometimes is when people give great, long, passionate prayers about what they want God to do and then stop. Like, all right, God, you sort it out. Now we'll go home and have our tea. You know, it's actually about praying for God to enable us to do the things that God wants to do. And if we don't, including ourselves in those prayers, then they may well just bounce around. Now, that's me doing my bit with the mic because I had the chance, but I'm sure that one or two other people want to contribute as well. Gentleman back there.
I'm a police officer. I work in Southwark Borough, just moved from Barley Borough, but I'm also executive member of the Black Police Association under Youth Community. We've got a massive challenge here, and we're talking, but we need to see the action. We've said that time and time again. But how going forward, how are we going to evaluate what we're doing today? Because we come, we go, we come back again, but what's going forward? We need to see what's happening thereafter. We need to evaluate. Another thing we need to do is we're trying to open our doors to young people. Now, I was a young person that I was brought up in a Christian home. I didn't go down that knife crime route. I thought friends that did. We're missing one thing. We want to bring young people into the church, and it's a good thing. But hear what? It's not cool to go to church. Okay? We need to be real about this. It's not cool. So how are we going to make it cool for them? Okay? And that's the reality of it. Because they're not going to come into the church if we're not real with them. So we need the real people to talk on their level, and that's when you bring them in. But you need to hear what? We need the trust. We need to think about how we're going to do that. You need the right, I go to meetings and meetings, you need the right people to bring them in, to really get that trust, because they don't trust us. Because right now, it's in the media. They hear us talking to, I do youth projects, football, stuff like that, bits and pieces, but hear what? When I want to get them to come into one of our things, they're thinking, oh, you want to catch my data. All that kind of thing. So we need to be really real with what we're doing and how we're going to do it and how we're evaluating it.
Thank you very much. Gentleman down here hasn't spoken yet, I don't think. Just try and make sure I get a variety of people.
Thank you. I'm Paul Weary from Walworth Methodist Church, not far from here. I went to workshops 2 and 3, and a point that was made in both workshops was the importance of churches to get involved in things like Safer Neighbourhood Boards, other fora that are happening in the community. In the case of my own church, when I had a church member about 3 years ago who was very concerned about knife crime, and he came and said, Reverend, I think we ought to do something. I said, I think the first thing we need to do is find out what's going on, because I think the churches do have a history of kind of leaping into situations, often totally ignorant of all the work that's already taking place. So we went along to a meeting of the Southwark Anti-Knife Crime Forum, and we were going around the table, everybody introducing themselves, and we said, we've come from Walworth Methodist Church, and they said, we've been waiting for somebody from the churches to turn up to one of our meetings, and we're just so happy that Christians are shown an interest. I think then we have a responsibility to demonstrate what, if you like, added value we as churches can bring. I mean, for us, of course, there is the spiritual element. Not everybody will see that, but many of our churches, my own church, has very strong connections in the West African community, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria. We've got considerable inner reach into communities which other organisations don't have, and we're very privileged to be able to work very closely with families. And I think we need to think about what we can bring to these fora, because they want us to join in, and if we're not sitting at the table picking up the invitations, then we haven't got a voice.
I just want to address the question, what can the wider church do? I'm not from London, but I was called to come and stand with London. I think I'm representative of a lot of people across this country who are breaking their heart over what they're reading in the newspapers. And I think London cannot do this on its own. You've had this meeting today, but I think you need to be drawing on the bigger picture across the whole of this country. And I think similar sort of gatherings, or even cross-network gatherings, need to be held. I really believe that it's time for us to break down the walls, actually, even territorial walls. This answer will only come when we come together, north and south. I'm from up north, but I will support the south. I've travelled here today, and I believe I have the same heart with you. I am one with you, and you need to understand that. I've stood with somebody and prayed with somebody in Manchester who has a passion for what's going on with knife crime in Manchester. So it's happening all over this country. So I just want to say that. I also want to say, I represent Neighbour Prayer Network. I work for them. I encourage prayer for neighbours and streets. So pray for your neighbours, care for your neighbours and share Jesus with your neighbours. There's no accident where you live. And as we build up our relationships, where our atmospheres will change by the grace of God, and these things will be alleviated.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate that. John.
Thank you. I'm John Ackland for assisting at the Minster Church in Croydon. Thank you. I also wanted to say about the third workshop in particular. First of all, to build on everything that people have said, I feel that they are the sheer voicing of Christian gospel values. And the way we live our lives, and the way we conduct our lives, and the way we value and we love people, even the people that sometimes are difficult to love, is a key aspect of our Christian calling. What I felt very strongly about the third workshop is there was a way of viewing this issue that we are facing from two different dimensions. One was what he called the ground, and the other is what he called the air. The ground is what we've been talking about here. How do we conduct ourselves? How do we come together? How do we share, care, and pray for this situation? Vitally important. That's ground. But you cannot get the overview by staying on the ground. You have to lift ourselves up so we can look down and see the various aspects and complexities, both socially, morally, what's happening in our schools, what's happening that affects families. It's very, very easy to turn around and say these are all young black men without a black father role model. Well, sometimes that's true, but it's not true to say therefore there's our explanation. It doesn't work. We don't have that detail, we don't have that statistical knowledge, we don't have that insight. What we need is very clear, qualified training and guidance as to what these key issues are, because only then can we really put God's work into practice.
John, thank you. I'm going to stop us there because we need to move on. As Michael was saying, we need to move on to what we are actually going to do, because there is great value in listening and learning and speaking. But there is always a danger too that if you just do that and keep it in the little bubble of the day, then it ends up being a very pleasant memory, but it doesn't actually lead into anything else. And that is definitely not what we want from today. So we're going to now have a final few minutes in which Bishop Rob is going to lead us again in reflecting on what we do next. And then after that, Bishop Sarah will wind us up and send us out with God's blessing.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know about anyone else. I feel absolutely exhausted after today. It's been extraordinary, hasn't it? The quality of the contributions that people have been making and the sense of energy and the sense of passion that you have brought today has been palpable. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for caring, particularly about our young people across this capital and beyond. There's going to be two sections to this feedback sort of moment. And the first section involves lots of you and little of me, and then the second section is vice versa. So I just want to read out this quote to you, though, before I ask you to do the first task, because I was really struck by this. Do you remember the words of Mercia earlier on? It takes a village to raise a child, but that same village can also kill the child. A young person can burn the village down just to feel its warmth. I'm going to repeat that because I was being really struck by this. It's been sort of going around my head all afternoon. It takes a village to raise a child, but that same village can also kill the child. A young person can burn the village down just to feel its warmth. My dear friends, inside your packs that you were given when you arrived for today's Pan London Summit, you had a piece of paper. The piece of paper looks like this one here. It's got name, church name, position in church, that sort of stuff that's there. If you haven't got all this, I love this. It's so well organised. Thank you, Elizabeth. It looks a bit like this on the screen here. If you haven't got one of those, then there are a pile at the back, and we're just about to move them forward. So if you need to wave your hand up in the air if you haven't got one. I know that you're the real keenies because you've been here all day. This is the real hardcore of today's Pan London Summit because you're still here, and that's very good news. If you could spend the next sort of 10 minutes or so, please, filling in these forms. We've had a lot of discussions about what can my church do and what can the wider church do. This is your moment to make a pledge, my friends. I'd like you just to write your name and your church name and your position. If you have one in the church, you're all baptised children of God. If that's your position in church, then so much the better. I can't think of a more important one to write in that box. Contact email, and then my church's possible next step, and what support could you help with this? Could you please fill in those those sections? And then as we leave a bit later on, when we've been commissioned by the Bishop of London, I want you to pop these bits of paper just in the box, which is there at the back of the room. This is going to help us gauge the feedback, but this is for you to say, okay, what am I going to do? And how am I going to enable a conversation to take place at the church where I worship? What's the shape of that conversation? What's it going to look like? What points am I going to make? What am I going to take away from today's conference? There's also responsibility, it seems to me, for leadership in the church to perhaps create a culture, perhaps more so than we've been doing up until this point, which enables that sense of flourishing around our children and youth work in order for that to take place. And we've got a number of asks as a result. And the bishops have been chatting downstairs, and these are some of the commitments that we're going to be making as a result of today. Hopefully creating a wider culture, because as we've heard already, these things come from the ground and they come from the air, and both of these are at work as a result of today's summit. One of the things that the bishops are focusing upon now is these things, the night shelters didn't happen all at once. They bubbled up bit by bit. So we're going to trial some stuff. We're going to trial some pilot projects, where we're going to look, a bit like the night shelters do, we're going to look at a number of boroughs across London where already we've got some good work taking place. We're going to trial out what happens if we bring different people in the room. Where we've got good youth workers taking place, we'll work closely with those. Where we've got good teachers, head teachers working, we'll work more closely with those. Where we've got street pastors, we'll work closely with those. We'll do some training amongst the local churches within that particular borough. We'll listen to the needs more intently of the young people within that particular borough. And we're going to try and do something on a trial basis, on a base that says, okay, if we focus on this particular area with our time, with our energies, and we do some collective focusing like we've done with the night shelters, then we'll monitor the results. We'll see what happens. We can't do the whole of London overnight. We've got to start somewhere. So where is the work going reasonably well so far across in our boroughs, and what are the ways in which that can be repackaged, perhaps with extra resource, extra support, and what impact, if we organise ourselves better, what might the impact of that be? So this is about starting organically. Any big idea which the bishops come up with, we know is going to fail. A grounded project which is rooted in passion, where the passion already exists, building people up from the ground level, it seems to me, is the way to go forward. In terms of then creating from these series of projects, what is going well, what can we learn from, and where are we going to go from here as a church? So that's one of the commitments that we're going to be making as a result of today's conference. The second one is to recognise that we can't keep our learning just in the room. One of the wonderful things, one of the very great privileges of being a bishop or an archdeacon, someone in senior leadership in the churches, is that we are involved in all sorts of networks. So it means that today, this unique occasion of bringing our churches together today, I think doesn't stay in this room. We've already started it. I don't know if you've been looking at the Twitter feeds, the Twitter conversation that's been going on. It's been quite remarkable. It's been quite extraordinary today. So how do we take the learning from here further out? Because I go to all sorts of meetings, I go and meet with all sorts of people, and I get to have a platform to share all sorts of things. And today's learning will affect the sorts of presentations that I make. And having spoken to my colleagues, it's going to affect them as well with the sort of presentations that they make. So how can we then bring that sort of wider sense of culture change in a society which, let's face it, tries to quieten the churches, makes the voice of Jesus that little bit quieter, particularly in the public square? But actually bringing together 250 people from across London who care about this issue, I think would make a significant impact for those who are in positions of secular authority. I think for us to go to our boroughs, our borough leaders, I think for us to go to our members of parliament and others, because let's face it, no one has the answer. If we were to say that we were organising ourselves much more creatively and in a focused way, the impact, I think, would be quite remarkable in terms of changing the dynamic of the conversation. So when we're having thoughts like, do you know what, the patterns that we've just seen, that we've just heard about from our speakers and from our own experience, there are elements there of grooming and abuse taking place. Let's talk openly about that. The church quite rightly is now coming to terms with a poor track record around safeguarding. But actually the processes that we are now entertaining and encouraging, and the culture shift that's going on within our churches needs to go beyond our churches in a proactive way. And here we've got an issue that we're picking up around us, where young people are being picked up from their school gates, from primary to secondary, and they are being groomed into abusive relationships. Let's use the language. Let's be open and honest about these sorts of things and speak to those in positions of further authority with that sort of sense of being able to speak truth to power in these situations. We're letting, from today's conversations, the poor be our teachers. And that's a key part, it seems to me, of being able to take our findings from this session back to our senior church leaders across our different dioceses and see where that might lead, using the networks that God has given to us in a very creative and wonderful way. So that's the second thing that we're thinking of. The third thing that we're thinking of, and we picked up a little bit this from Mike's presentation a little bit earlier on today, the Deputy Director of Education for Southwark. There is this issue, isn't there, around transition, and there's the issue around exclusions. Now, I know nationally the Church of England is educating over 1 million young people today in our schools. And so there's something collectively there, and we need to begin on London, begin to work at London and Southwark and Chelmsford to see what's going on. How are we making sure that those most at-risk children are not being adversely affected by the decisions that our schools are making? Now, I'm not putting any pressure on our teachers at all. I have to say at this moment, our teachers and our head teachers particularly do a fantastic job, and our exclusion levels in our church schools are certainly lower, it seems to me, looking at the figures, than they are across other schools. But there is something here about what are the ways in which we can support our boards of education, what are the ways in which we can support our schools, what are the ways in which we can support opportunities, perhaps through the schools, through our open churches that we've been describing about. I've heard now from several youth workers that the most at-risk time is between 4 and 6. Several forums I've heard those statistics in. And is there any way in which we can perhaps, working alongside our schools, perhaps on a borough basis to start off with, is there some strategic stuff that we can do in a more joined up way as a result of today?
I think somewhat symbolic of the way in which we have grown and developed in our relationships with each other, that the two bishops of the Diocese of Southwark who are here moved here from the Diocese of London, and that the Bishop of London, through a slightly circuitous route, has moved from Southwark to London. So that maybe is symbolic of that sharing together, which has been actually expressed far more widely through today. And I'm very glad to be able to hand over to Sarah to conclude our day.
Thank you. It's I have to say it's a real frustration that I haven't been able to be here for today. And I've begun to pick up on both the enthusiasm and the passion that there is here, and I am really encouraged. I know that there are many people that have made today work, and before we have a time of prayer and commitment, I'd like you to join with me to thank everybody that's put today together. I'd also like to thank you for your commitment, for having been here throughout the whole of the day. I'm very, very grateful for that. I have to say, for me, it is, I have great sadness when I see our young men and young people dying. It has been a great sorrow for me. And I recognise the fear that there is when I talk to the young people in the community. And today, just capturing the glimpse of what I've seen, I know that you know that we are a people of hope, and that we have a Saviour who's the Prince of Peace, and that we will hold on to that promise that the light has come into the darkness and the darkness will not overcome it. And with hope, the real reality of hope is that we can be part of that and that we can make that difference. So in a minute I'm going to ask you to stand and I'm going to pray a prayer, and then I'm going to invite you to join in with some words on the screen. And this is an opportunity for us to commit ourselves to make a difference and to be that hope that we long to see. So would you like to stand? And I'm going to leave a moment of silence, and it's your opportunity with God to have your conversation. We have gathered together to express our determination to be part of the solution to serious violence in our communities. We go from here not forgetting what troubles our community faces or believing that we have all the answers, but with a renewed desire to seek the will of God, Christ's compassion for the young people of this city. And so we pray, may God uphold and restore the young people. May he keep them from all harm. May God have compassion for our communities and give us back hope. May God go before us, teaching us what is right. May we walk the paths of peace. And may God bless you. May he strengthen you. May he send you out from here as bearers of peace, as proclaimers of the good news. So go in peace, mend what is broken, unite what is divided, and live the gospel. And we pray together. God of power, may the boldness of your Spirit transform us. May the gentleness of your Spirit lead us. May the gifts of your Spirit equip us to serve and worship you now and always. In the name of Christ. Amen. Thank you.